Play ball. Baseball's back. We'll look to the future and make our predictions. We'll also look forward to what the draft brought the Bears and look back at the career and impact of Howard Cosell. So we're looking both ways as we cross the next half hour on Chevrolet Sports Fire. Okay, I'm Mike Lederman. This is Chevrolet Sports Fire, and this week we're joined by the Bears beat writer for the Daily Herald. Welcome to John Mullen. John, good to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, from the Chicago Sun-Times, writer and columnist, off covering the Bulls this weekend at the Hive, Bryant Hewitt, and covering anyone, anytime, anything from WSCR Sports Radio. Don't belittle yourself, Terry Boers.
Well, thank you. I feel like Brian Hanley today.
Yes, sir. Yeah. We'll get into that later. But with the 1995 baseball season hurriedly put back together, it's tough telling the teams and their divisions without a scorecard. So, as a public service, Terry, let's see. We got the Sox and the Cubs, each in the respective centrals of their leagues.
Right.
And after that, are there any other comparisons you can make between the two teams? Although the opening series, it's role reversal, huh?
It looks to me like it is, doesn't it? The Cubs pitching has been very good for the most part. The Sox has been very bad. Case closed. Cubs win the NL Central, and Sox will fade in.
Thank you very much. Join us again next week.
You know what's beautiful about it is that nobody's noticing this. Nobody's going to these games.
Yeah, it is something.
You know, we've talked about that over the weeks, and nobody's going to these things.
Well, they listened to us. They listened to this show where we recommended that the fans just stay away. Don't get too excited. If you went to 4 games a month, go to 2 games a month, and so forth and so on.
Maybe no games a month.
Yeah.
Getting a little judging of what's going on.
Well, if Frank Thomas hit a home run in Comiskey Park and no one were there, would it go?
Would it still count in Stats Inc.?
Would it hurt?
That's interesting. You know, we did say this, and the fans are very standoffish. They're coming, they're saying...
They're booing, they're throwing things on the field, they're hissing and jeering before Mike Devereaux.
Yeah, who pays money to go to something that you hate? You put down, what, $15 to go boo the existence of what you're going to see.
Well, now they're talking, I can't believe they even let this come out. Talk about a news leak. They're admitting that there may be a boycott of the All-Star game. What could possibly be worse timing than to come out and say something?
No, this is Eugene Orza from the Players Association.
The dumbest guys in America.
Because the league did not make the payment that was due the players.
That's exactly right.
So the players are right in this case, but why bring it up now?
No, it's a legitimate thing because the owners tried to screw them out of the $8 million last year, and they still haven't made the payment. But
why bring it up now?
Bring it up now.
Well, I think, you know, we've said, though, that while we thought that might be a little bit before they come back, I think the warm weather will tell you. If they're not back in June and July, then you have a real problem if you're Major League Baseball. Then, ladies and gentlemen, you have a problem. Because you remember, this is still April.
Yeah.
We're still looking at cold weather in a lot of places. It's still not great baseball weather. If it's June and July, and there's still only 20,000 people in White Sox Park for a team, I believe, first prediction, will win the AL Central. Then you've got a real problem.
But I have noticed something, and agree or disagree, there hasn't been that elasticity. The fans haven't snapped back the way they did in the past. Maybe they've had, 9 months to ruminate over this, or maybe it is just a question of the weather.
Well, you say maybe they're just sort of huddled and no one really snaps much when they're hunkered down. But as Terry said, if baseball is sort of as perennial as the grass, it sort of comes up every year, regardless of what's going on in the world. And as Terry said, if it doesn't come up with the grass in June or July, there's some serious issues.
And then you got a problem. And you know the NBA playoffs are taking everybody's notice. You start them all at the same time. You start a baseball season and the NBA playoffs, which a lot of people are very excited about, particularly in our city. It's a tough sell.
Didn't it strike you how dead Comiskey Park's atmosphere was? I mean, even for Comiskey Park.
Freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're always freezing. But, I mean, the first game of the year, and you got Frank Thomas, and you got, but they were just sitting there.
It was even worse in Milwaukee the day before. But the game... I was watching on opening day, and if you were channel surfing that first day, you could see 3 different games at once. And I was doing a little of that, and I was getting reeled back in a little bit. And sure enough, later that night, before I retired for the evening, I flipped it on, and there was Colorado playing the Mets. And I don't know how many people saw this game, but it reminded me that this game can still be great. I mean, it was the first game ever in Coors Stadium out there, and
they didn't fill it.
It was
great fans that had 75,000 crowds up many times last year.
Coors half full or half empty. There's a line there somewhere. But in the bottom of the 14th, and 3 times Colorado had come back to tie it and keep the game going. The bottom of the 14th, Dante Bichette turns on the fastball against this struggling reliever for the Mets, a guy by the name of Remlinger, who clearly was the last pitcher they had in the bullpen, and it reminded you how great baseball, the game, and the games still can be.
Right, which leads us into discussion of how these teams are going to do this year. And I'm just wondering what anybody's feeling is, first of all, on the two divisions that the Sox and Cubs are in. You're picking the White Sox to win.
Well, I think the White Sox, the biggest advantage they have is the schedule. They lost 18 games against AL East teams. The Indians lost 18 games against AL West teams. Clearly, the AL West has not taken great strides forward at this point. I mean, I like the Mariners in the West. That tells you a lot about the West.
They're going to be 500?
Well, if they're 500, they'll probably win by 10 games.
Yeah.
I think the White Sox can win that division despite the somewhat stumbling start. When you get outscored 21-7 in your first two games, you might have a problem.
What about
sounds like the Bears?
What about the East? Now, the East and the AL East could be the best division in baseball. Probably is the best division in baseball.
Yankees. I mean, I don't know how
You take the Yankees of last year and you add a pitcher. You know, even if no one likes him, you add a pitcher, Jack McDowell. That does not make them worse.
and John Wetland to close games.
Right.
So I think you have to look at the Yankees, the Blue Jays, maybe in the Orioles. I mean, if you're looking for a wild card, if the White Sox don't win the Central, you could be in trouble.
Yeah.
I would recommend they win the Central.
And I want to say one more thing about the White Sox. Again, it's very, very early, and I hope I'm wrong for a lot of reasons. But Chris Sabo, is it just me? It doesn't look like a number 4 hitter to me for 144 games. Okay,
It's early. Let's go to the National League. Okay, we're running out of time on this segment.
Atlanta
in the
Greg Maddux,
right?
another Cy Young.
Yeah, hard to pick against them. Atlanta.
Until they lose.
Okay, in the Central, Cincinnati.
Oh, how do you not go?
As long as you keep away from the Cubs. Stay away from the Cubs.
Cubs is the wild card.
Cubs are not that bad. The Cubs are somewhere within 10 games under 500. I think they could be 500. I don't think they're as bad as people thought they were in the West. I like the Padres. Now, this is how bad that West is.
Yeah,
Padres. You mean
I
the
know.
Houston Incarnates?
I know.
The Padres. My God. Maybe they
feel
ought to
bad
lop
about
off
it.
the West in both leagues and go from there. All right.
Rockies.
And you like the Rockies. I like the Rockies, too. The NFL, their teams are predicting their draft choices will excel. We'll have thoughts about that next.
Chevrolet Sports Fire is brought to you by your local Chicagoland Chevrolet Geo dealers, the Chicago Sun-Times, Sports with an Attitude, and Zenith. The quality goes in before the name goes on.
Brian Hewitt just reminded me, Lou Holtz calls him Rashid Salam, but he's Rashaan Salam. Don't forget it, because he's a name greeted with glee by many, many, if not most, Bears fans. The team made the Heisman Trophy winner its #1 draft pick. Of course, both Brian Hewitt and Terry Boers had separate scoops that Salam would be heading this way weeks before the event. So, gentlemen, take your kudos. But John Mullen, even though you didn't project him to the Bears in your draft, mock draft, if you will, everything's a mock draft.
Mockery draft.
Yeah.
Okay, good ink, good stats. Why was he so low? I mean, is this a good pick? Forget all the baloney. Is this a good pick for the Bears?
The bottom line is yes, I think they are a better team with Rashaan Salam than they were last year. So that having been said, let's look at the realities of some of that pick. The reason he fell so low was not a reflection, I think, on him. It was a reflection on Tyrone Wheatley. Wheatley was to have gone higher in the round. When Wheatley started falling, most teams had him rated below Salam. He wasn't going to go until Wheatley was picked.
You mean the other way around? They had Salam rated below Wheatley?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, however I said it.
That's all right.
You know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's
We
okay.
got you.
When Wheatley kept falling, I think everyone started panicking. My God, we might get stuck with this guy. I mean, there was some real reasons why he was not popular without getting off into Tyrone Wheatley. As early as Friday or even Saturday morning, the Giants had called Colorado with a question, tell me everything about Salam, we're going to draft him. They were set on drafting him. Got in the draft room, and Dan Reeves overruled and said we're going to take Tyrone Wheatley. Now all of a sudden dominoes started falling because Salam was to have gone in that slot. Now all of a sudden the Raiders grabbed Napoleon Kaufman.
That's the guy the Bears like, right?
Second round. Not a guy that would have taken that first pick. Jacksonville jumps up and grabs James Stewart.
Yeah.
Now what you have is panics, not real true panic, but the Bears had wanted to trade down in the first round, possibly pick up even an offensive lineman, which would have been a little bit of an upset pick, trade up in the second round and possibly grab Terrell Fletcher.
Running back from Wisconsin.
Yeah, 1,200-yard gainer, not a bad pick. Within the draft room, with the war room, the debate raged. Can we still trade down? And the consensus finally was, if we trade down, there sits Green Bay, New England, teams that wanted a running back, all of a sudden they might not get anything.
Like Cleveland. That was just a team that didn't get anything it wanted.
Yeah, then the Packers could have taken Salam, too.
Yes.
The Bears would have maybe eternally looked bad if he turns out to be a great player.
They would have gotten no one.
And they would have picked Salam with that
Well,
pick.
and they traded the pick, though, right?
Packers picked right after. They were so bummed out they traded the pick.
Got out of
Which
Dodge.
Packer picks did the Packers pick after the Packers
Yeah,
pick?
Packers picked
Easy for you to
They
say.
pick Roger
John,
Peckinpah. They picked.
Get out of here.
I'm sorry.
Who did the Bears, if all things had fallen sort of instead of dominoes and mild panic and Dan Reeves overruling and so forth and so on, who would the Bears have liked to have taken with the 21st pick?
Well, you know, it would be a little unfair to Salam to say he was really their second choice. I mean, that again, you have to preface that. They're not unhappy with this pick. I think Dave Wanstead saw Terrell Fletcher as his Emmitt Smith, and you use that word in the war room. He's a 195-pound, tough guy, faster than Salam. The kind of guy, as one scout said, when he gets hemmed in, you kind of lean forward. You come forward in your seat like something's going to happen. Kaufman was that kind of a guy. The type of runner, Barry Sanders. Again, not to put him in that class, but you want somebody who can make something out of nothing. With Salam, what you've got, the Bears now have 5 running backs that are between 215 and 225 pounds. I think if you collect all 6, you do get the NFL matching set of steak knives.
Well, they do have them all, yeah. I mean, they do have
They're
them all.
one sort of a set here.
So what do you see? He will start, by the way, right? I mean, there seems to be no doubt at this point. You will finally see, in actuality, a Dave Wanstead first-round draft pick on the field from day one, right? I mean, I don't get any sense.
A little odd, though, from the team that stresses everybody has to earn a job.
Yeah, it's odd, but on the other hand, it's not surprising. He almost sort of has to do it after Conway and Theory. He has to say, gee, maybe if I can convince you that I finally made a good pick, you'll believe that I
Brian,
have.
it's not that unusual. Is it running backs are the players who really get the fastest start in any draft? Isn't that true? I mean, they're the most likely to start and excel early, and of course peter out sooner.
I'll let you be the Wanstead apologist, but I mean you're right. Technically you're right, but I mean I saw Rashaan Salam play. I was there for the Fiesta Bowl, and he wasn't even the best player. He wasn't even the best player on Colorado's offense. Cordell Stewart was. He was the best athlete, and Michael Westbrook was maybe the second best athlete. Now the guy did win the Heisman Trophy. Again, I hope he does well. Nothing against him. I think he's a nice runner, but I'm not sure he fits in to what the Bears are trying to do and the way their offense sets up.
Right, what their need. My first reaction when they drafted him was they drafted Raymond Harris again.
Oh,
Got a little faster Raymond.
who will be the fullback, right?
Right. Raymond Harris was a 220-pound, 6-foot yardage after the first hit kind of guy. I mean, again, I say this all
but John, you know, when you're talking about Terrell Fletcher and the Bears, wasn't Terrell Fletcher a second-string guy at Wisconsin? I mean, in effect, he was a second-string running back that the Bears are falling in love with. See, I'm very confused by him, and I believe what you're saying about Dan Reeves. He's a little jumpy, but I still think they have the better back of the two in Tyrone Wheatley. I really do. I think Tyrone Wheatley has a chance to be a terrific NFL player.
In the short time we have, let's talk about the second round, because here the Bears went to unusual choices, a project with injury and the punter. Now, you know, I mean, Ray Guy was a first-round draft choice, and Patrick Riley, not to be confused with Pat Riley, coming off ACL surgery. Okay, Mr. Bears expert, what's your read?
You know, I'll tell you, I may be, again, the out-of-step one here. I thought Patrick Riley was a good pick. I think there has been enough checking into his knee condition. I think it's already 85% back. I don't believe it was a complete tear. This was, and Warren Sapp was not the only one doing some business up front for Miami.
Yeah,
this guy was
and
a
plus
player.
we know Wanstead loves to pick guys from places where he once coached. But what about the punter? I mean, they screwed up Gardocki, or maybe Gardocki screwed himself up, but Gardocki once was a good punter, and all of a sudden he was a bad punter, and coaching has something to do with that, and that maybe cost them a second-round pick, because now they have to use a second-round pick to pick a punter.
But they did address needs all over the place. I mean, they did need a punter. They had invited, were going to invite Mark Royals to camp or something, and then they... you know, the first time he booms a 48-yarder and pins somebody inside the 10-yard line, you'll change your mind.
But Gardocki was doing that 2 years ago.
You'll change your tune.
All right. Coming up, we'll take a three-step drop, and we'll talk about a man who made a difference in our next segment. He made a difference, even if you couldn't stand it. Well, he certainly was an original. Howard Cosell, who died this past week at the age of 77, hadn't been on Monday Night Football for a decade. Still, everyone knew who he was. For 40 years, Cosell brought a new look to sports broadcasting and sports journalism, and the new wave of sports is showbiz. It's a strange mix, Brian. You know, you're talking about a scholar, a showman, a reporter, a clown, a buffoon. I mean, you pick your...
Not necessarily in that order.
Yeah,
you know, Howard Cosell, he was a guy who, well, it was Dick Young, the reporter for the New York paper, said he put on a toupee, changed his name, and told it like it was. I mean, that told you a little bit about him. Jimmy Cannon, I think it was, said if Howard Cosell had been a sport, it would have been rollerball. The thing that I respected the most about Cosell, and there were lots of things I deplored about him, but basically, when it came down to it, he wasn't afraid of anything. He was utterly fearless. And I wish there was more of that in our profession. That's the one thing I think you can say about him, Mike. He was fearless.
And the point was also that he told you how fearless he was. I mean, that's the thing that alienated so many people. I'm telling you that I am the best, which masked, of course, this massive insecurity on this guy. I mean, no matter what happened, it was never good enough. A miserable man when he died.
Yeah, and he thinks the lady doth protest too much, shouting how brave he is and how fearless he is.
You know, Mike, there are those who suggest, by the way, that some of these stances he took, he didn't necessarily believe in them, per se, but that was what he knew. Well, maybe with Muhammad Ali, maybe with a lot of different things over the course of a career, that he took up a lot of causes that maybe, just maybe, I've heard people suggest who knew him, he didn't necessarily believe in, but he knew it would cause the kind of reaction that he did. That he would be this guy out there defending Muhammad Ali and so forth. I mean, it was a different climate then than it is now.
Right.
And he made a lot of money off of boxing, and then all of a sudden turned around like that and said boxing's no good. And then he the same thing with pro football. He made a lot of money, made a lot of fame off the football, and then all of a sudden he was sort of done with it, and it was sort of done with him, and now he's saying pro football is a, quote, stagnant bore. So he was very much, he was very agile that way.
Almost opportunistic here when he does a Tex Cobb fight. He's abhorring boxing, the sport that made him.
Yeah, I just had a problem. You know, I think that I understand what people are saying, that he revolutionized sports broadcasting and the Monday Night Football thing. But I really, you know what, there is a higher authority here at work than just what kind of a broadcaster he was, right? I mean, this guy was truly one of the most miserable men I'd ever met in my life. Absolute miserable. I mean, even when he, a couple of years ago, Bob Costas even said that, you know, when you open Howard Cosell up, the demons and the devils spill out of him. You know, this is Bob Costas, who really likes everybody.
Sure.
I mean, I just thought there was a lot of stuff that Howard did in his latter years, and I understood some of the bitterness. But why? Why do you want to? Why do you want to do what he did? I mean, he trashed Frank Gifford. For God's sakes, Frank Gifford. Well, he has no talent per se. I mean, did he really deserve that? And a lot of other people in his life. You know, people who at one time, Mike, did mean something to him.
Yeah. But you know, the bigger part of Howard, though, again, we're sort of getting into what is easy to do with Howard, which is get off onto the personal side. Yeah. The man was part of making sports what it is today.
For better or for worse.
For better or worse. I mean, he elevated it. I still remember going, pulling into my father driving me to high school in the early 60s and hoping he would drive slow because at 5 minutes to 8 there would be Howard Cosell speaking of sports and the headlines. Right. And that was a big deal.
He had more impact on sports than anybody in the media end here. And in fact, I wanted to jump into your role a second and ask you, because we basically all, Terry and John and I, all sort of came up through newspapers. You came up through broadcasting. What kind of influence did Howard Cosell have on you when you were a young guy?
He was someone who you knew had something special. He was a man who, because he didn't play the game, he didn't feel that he had to apologize. He was a man who can come in and say, look, this is the way it appears to me. I don't like it. I do like it. He championed causes that weren't popular, and whether or not,
I just don't
whether or not that would get him anywhere, it was gutsy. It was gutsy. At the time, in the early 1970s, when Muhammad Ali was against the war, and oh, how could he be so unpatriotic? But frankly, I think one of the reasons we're sitting here today is Howard Cosell.
I agree.
Absolutely. And yet, when you meet the man, I met him several times, maybe 3 times, I should say. The first time I was watching him at a tennis club. Martina Navratilova, when she was in the middle of discussing her coming out, and everybody was picking her apart, he just sat there and just constructed from memory, ad-lib, the way he always did, about a 2-minute capsule for television. Not a mistake, fluid, cogent. These are the kind of things that as a broadcaster and as a journalist, you just sit there and admire. And the next time I met him was about a year or so before he died, and he had short-term memory loss. And I found myself prompting Howard Cosell, which was a very, very strange. He was, saying something to in honor of John Mackey and Gene Upshaw, and he kept forgetting things. And I'm saying, oh my, this is how far the man's health has fallen.
Well, I interviewed him once at that stage in his life, and he was bragging to me about his appearances in the Woody Allen movies, and there was that one memorable scene where he's narrating the sex scene between Louise Lasser and Woody Allen.
The wedding night.
And he was telling, his big point there was, we only needed one take to do that scene. He was
yeah.
So I'm not doubting, don't misunderstand me, I'm not doubting his legacy in broadcasting. I just think that there's another side to him that wasn't very pleasant, that he took great joy in sniping at the media, and writers in particular. He had no relationship at all with the print media, to my knowledge. If there was any, please help me with it. I mean, maybe a few guys here and there. But I mean, he took great joy in doing that, and I don't deny his legacy as a broadcaster and what he brought and what he did. But I just think there's another side to it that you still answered a little bit higher authority, and he fell far short.
Well, good indication, speaking about a higher
Sports Channel is